explore during the talk. The exhibition on view represents a recent series of works that explores deep green theory. So those not familiar with deep green theory, we'll touch on some of those topics over the next 40 minutes. So as some broader aesthetic concerns, poetic and philosophical inquiries will come up during the talk. And yeah, so I hope this is a chance for everyone to get to know Candace's work, get to know the works that are on view more intimately than you've seen them on Instagram and Facebook. So joining us from her studio in Vermont is our dear Candace Jensen. So glad to have you here, Candace.
Great. Hi. Thank you, Mary. Thanks for the great introduction. Thank you for safely distancing yourself all the way to the gallery today.
Yeah, I'm a Bushwick resident, so it was easy for me to get here with my mask and everything. So
awesome. Yeah, stay safe and well, everybody. This is really exciting. The show has been up for almost 7 weeks, but most of those weeks it's been behind closed doors. So I'm happy to have a little bit of opportunity to get the illuminations that were made specifically for this show really out into the world a little bit. Almost all of the work in Deep Green Query are Gaia illuminations, which is a term that I coined when I was doing my MFA at the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts. And it's just a shorthand. There are all calligraphic illuminations, calligraphic drawings and paintings that use gold leaf and traditional methods to get at language and really honoring language that has to do with deep ecology and our relationship to Mother Earth or Earthship, whichever your thing is. So that's the short and narrow of it. Mary, I'd love before we start talking specifically about pieces, could you kind of enter the gallery and give everybody a little bit of an overview of the show, and then we could maybe start at our first work?
That's a great idea, Candace. Let's do that. All right, I'm going to flip my camera around here. Technical issue, hang on.
Technical issues are fun. We embrace them.
Okay, hang on. I think the issue actually, I'm not really sure what, I just did it before okay. All right. Thanks for your patience, everybody. Thank you.
Good.
All right.
Looks good.
All right. So we're at 56 Bogart Street when you enter the gallery. So there's just this wonderful mix of these works on paper, and you can maybe, I don't know if you're watching it on a computer screen, but you can sort of get a sense of the scale of the works. Here's the lovely reading station that's included in the show. So you can sort of see how this work over here, which will be the last work that we talk about today, you can just get a sense of the sort of a large, human-sized, large experience of that work in the space. So the title of the show is Hand Drawn Onto the Walls. So that, I don't know if that's something that you can get a sense of, but a lot of little details that are just really, really wonderful to be around in the physical space.
Awesome. Great. Thanks, Mary. So the one that you're in front of right now, the Earth Prayer and the Chthonic Prayer series, I think that those works were the first ones we were going to talk about today. Maybe a little bit closer, you can actually see what you're seeing right now is a badly gilded book, and then also a letterpress print on an Awagami Kozo paper. The letterpress print was made using my own calligraphy that was turned into a copper plate and produced by hand on my CNP press. There's an edition of 30. And so that's available to make the language of the Earth Prayer accessible, because if you actually can take the video over to the ink drawing, the chthonic prayer painting that accompanies it, the language that's in Earth Prayer is also embedded here into this illumination, and it's a little bit less discernible. So it's a funny combination of what you can and cannot read, which is part of the play of it. So Mary, what do you think? What should we talk about?
Well, yeah, this is, you know, you chose this to be the first work that we see when we come into the gallery. So it seems like a really good place to start. I guess, you know, so the title is Chthonic Prayer and Earth Prayer, as you stated. And I was just wondering if you could just give us a little bit of insight into that term chthonic, what it means to you, maybe how you see it as being presented in the work. And can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So chthonic it's Greek, and it's it's often used in reference to deities or sort of sub-deities that have to do with the underworld. So literally of the earth, embedded in the dirt. And then of course there are more metaphorical ways that we can use this term, and etymologists and people who study language and even speak Greek would probably know a great deal more about it than I do. But it is the root word that is borrowed by Donna Haraway, who is the author of the Badly Gilded book that goes with these two pieces, which is Staying with the Trouble, Making Kin in the Cthulhucene. So she coined that term, Cthulhucene, which is the same root word as chthonic. So that is a little bit of a jab, I think, in reading her work, where she's sort of making fun of the idea of the Anthropocene, which is an era or a term that you may have heard, that really describes the geologic age that we're in as one defined by humanity. And so in her position, we are actually entering a time when we are going to be in such deep intrinsic relationship to the earth and to the soil and to the microbes and to all of the other critters, as she says, that we're actually not in the Anthropocene, and that's not a very useful term. Maybe we should perhaps call it Thulucene and really relate to the dirt and the matter beneath our feet. And I really love this. I think it's really important ideologically in our time to try to make sense of our relationship to that which has been diminished or that which hasn't been appreciated for a very long time. I mean, you see that in the way we use language very colloquially: cheaper than dirt, dirty. These things are not about the sacred when people are using that kind of terminology or those kinds of phrases. So I'm turning that on its head a little bit, and so is Donna Haraway and many of the other people who inspire me. So this is a prayer incorporating the words of my collaborator and friend Caroline Ross, who is an artist and forager and really incredible person who works in the UK. And then also some of Donna Haraway's words, really talking about the way that we as humans can become compost, can make kin with all of the other great, weird, living, breathing stuff that we share the soil with.
Yeah, I mean, so much of what you're saying is really visible in the work. You know, there's something about it that sort of reads like roots to me, especially like this form here that sort of has this, you know, ochre red color quality to it. And just the shape of it sort of coming upwards. I was just curious if you could talk about, I don't know, like the underground, what's happening underground, like with dirt and critters and yeah.
Yeah, sure. I don't know what's happening under there because unfortunately I live up here in the air, but there's a really interesting relationship between earth and air, earth and water. There's this elemental quality. And here, like the marbling that you're seeing that makes so much of the structure of the painting is the sort of earth element as it was captured on the surface of the water in the Suminagashi method that I use. But there's also a subversion of the way that the letters are written. Some of them are upside down. They could be reflected in water, or they could be buried in dirt. There's this sense that some things are accessible and are growing and are viable in the work. Those are the things that you might be able to read or discern, that are legible, truly legible. And then, of course, there's aspects that have been blotted out, that have bled over, that have been reduced to their pigments on the surface of the paper. And that really is them kind of becoming dirt again, composting and breaking down. It's pretty magical. I don't even have a green thumb. I'm like a budding herbalist and gardener. I'm not good at it yet. So this is stuff that I'm understanding that I need to have more relationship to, and I'm actively working that out.
That's, yeah, well, I guess there's probably some people on the call who would be able to help you with that. I guess there's, yeah, as I'm going through, what I'm seeing in the little thumbnail screen is just all these beautiful little vignettes, like little moments that are just like have so much activity going in them. And then in any given, you know, 5-inch like section of the work, there's little aspects of each of the things you've described. So yeah, so that I guess there's also, we haven't really discussed this. Well, I guess you mentioned that you know, there's this big open space here in which you've written, you've done your this beautiful calligraphy of, and that's the Earth Prayer, right? So that the
it's
sonic...
partially, it's the Earth Prayer and Donna Haraway's words extracted from Staying with the Trouble, which is the book to the left of the work. So they're both there, and they're both pretty legible when you're right next to them. It might be a little difficult to see on the Zoom because, Mary, you're holding stock still, and I can tell, but still it's you're not quite right in front of it, and it's not going to be easy to read on the Zoom call or on the Facebook Live. So just know that you'll get a chance to see it in life sometime in the future. And trust me that it's the Earth Prayer text, which is Caroline, she has this as a kind of mantra every day, and that might not be the term that she uses to describe it, but she sort of made a riff off of the Lord's Prayer, which is a really common Christian intonation, or something that you would say daily. It uses the same cadence, it uses the same structure, and it's not an exception of the Lord's Prayer. It's a sort of yes and approach to saying that we can have the same kind of consideration for the earth and for nature as a vessel that we can the Holy Trinity, if that's your jam. Yeah, it's a partner piece. There's this illumination, which may or may not be legible. Some of it is, very purposefully. And then there's the book that sort of creates this extract, this source text that is badly gilded. And then there's the letterpress that is also the source text, but is very, very carefully articulated and also made in an egalitarian way. There's multiple copies of it. So they're available more accessible to the really important language, the language that I think is very inspiring and interesting.
Yeah, I guess I want to just point out that there's, something that we probably won't see much of again, an invitation to pick up the work in the gallery. I guess that'll be probably one of the things that changes when we get back to a new normal. I guess now I'd like to move on to another work that's just at the other end of this long wall here. So this one is a diptych, and it's the Belonging Sutra. So I guess I'll just take a look at it. There's something about this piece, obviously, like the color values are a big change. from chthonic prayer, but there's, this like intentional earthiness about the, the dark, the tan and the browns in it. And I just wanted to sort of get into that. This piece is, I don't have the exact ingredients list. I sort of think of your materials as more of an ingredients list. But I know there are earth pigments in this work. And can you tell us about those earth pigments, where they come up, what it's like to work with them? Just if you can speak to that.
It's a little bit cheeky. It sounds a little bit esoteric and sort of like magical ingredients when you call it earth pigments, but very many common art materials are made from earth pigments. You can go in your backyard and dig up some clay or mud and grind it up, and you've got earth pigments that you can make drawings or paintings with. Obviously here we're seeing more jewel tones. So in this piece, especially in the left panel, or the left page really, the blues, there's cobalt blue and there's ultramarine blue. So that's literally ground up cobalt and lapis lazuli. Those are earth pigments. They're the pigment as it inherently comes to us from the chthonic lands, from deep underground or from the surface. Lapis lazuli as a pigment has a really remarkable history, or historically it was the pigment that was discovered in the mines of Afghanistan and in the Renaissance. Oh wow, my art history background is failing me. But anyway, it finally gave the Christian painters in Europe the opportunity to really paint Mary's robes blue. Like that's the source of it. And again, there's a lot of information I'm missing there. But it's remarkable how much these really common materials like stones, dirt, clay, burnt wood, or even fossilized wood, they're nothing. And then they're very, very remarkable and important when they are applied, or when they are taken mindfully and then sort of allowed to transform into something that we can give meaning and symbolism to. And then that makes me think, like, are there these inherent qualities symbolically, metaphorically embedded in these materials, or are we really ascribing them to them? And that's me being a little bit curious about panpsychism and a kind of an animistic approach. But it's cheeky to say earth pigments. Like I think the ingredients list for this piece is earth pigments and ink and gouache on paper, and all of those things have both mundane and like fabulously special roots and origins. So I think I saw there was an artist and she did these lovely charcoal drawings, and she didn't call them charcoal drawings, she called them well, the ingredients list for her said burnt wood on like mashed wood. And she was really describing the processes through which these mundane resources became sort of special and magical and charged. And I was kind of riffing off of that a little bit. But it really, all of the pigments that you're seeing, or all of the colors that you're seeing, it's either metal, mineral, clay, and they're sort of embedded on this wood pulp that has become paper, or cotton pulp in the case of Reeves BFK. And it's kind of interesting, like the elemental trace of the way that they came to be on there and captured. I find that very magical. It's a very magical process to me.
Yeah, you know, that magical quality and sort of like these things becoming rarefied. When we were chatting about doing this virtual gallery talk, you had mentioned this idea of muck, and like that these earth pigments sort of like come up from this. I love that word muck. I
promised Mary I would say muck. I forgot. I was so excited about my magical ideas. It's very mucky. I mean, the source of the magic gems and the powerful, beautiful black. Like, it's muck. It comes from muck, and it reminds me a little bit of a very overused adage, which is the lotus rises from the mud, you know, and that's true. The lotus puts down roots in the mud, and that's why it can blossom on the surface of the water. But the muck is very important, and it doesn't have to transform away from muck to be important or to be symbolically charged. There is a kind of magic and a light to the darkest, most disgusting, stinkiest muck. That's like a challenge that I make in these illuminations, I think.
Thank you for elaborating on that, Candace. I guess then the other thing that I wanted to ask you about with this was, you know, the marbling process feels so distinct in this one. I guess because there's more naked marbling in the finished work. Mm-hmm. So I was hoping you could talk about that process, sort of what, I don't know if it has like symbolic content of any kind, or just if you can just describe how it happens, because not everybody's had the chance to do
sure.
marbling.
Yeah, I actually am new to marbling, and I'm probably bad at it. Like, I'm not excellent at marbling because it is a new process that I'm learning. I took a class with Cheryl Oppenheim, who teaches in New York. I think she's even doing Suma Nagashi marbling classes online now because of the pandemic. So I highly recommend taking Cheryl's class and learning how to marble properly. She does teach well. But I just took a one-off class with her through the Center for the Book Arts in New York at one of their, it was at Talus, but it was hosted by the Center for Book Arts. And I learned just enough to be dangerous. And with Suma Nagashi, you take sumi ink, which really is wood char and ash that's mixed with a little bit of shellac. I actually don't know exactly how you make it, but it's a really beautiful, rich black ink that many people use to do drawings. But it's perfect for marbling. The tiny bit of shellac that's in the ink allows it to float on the surface of water. And you just need a little bit of soap, a little bit of sumi ink, and the surface of the water to do these patterns. And you allow the movement of the air currents in the room, the movement of your hands, and the gentle natural shift in the water to help create this white, black, gray. And then you literally print the surface of the water with fresh paper. And that's it. It is really a quick marbling process. There's very little setup. There's very little cleanup. And if you're really impatient and impetuous, which is my sort of style of making, you can get all kinds of wild patterns like what you're seeing. None of the clean bullseyes, which is often the way that you approach as a beginner when you're learning Suma Nagashi properly.
Yeah, I guess, so when we talked about the other day about this, there was talking about how the marbling process structures the works. I guess, I don't know, was there anything else you wanted to say about this piece before we go to our third artwork? How are we on time, by the way?
We're doing good. It's 4:27. We're doing excellent.
Oh, great. Yeah. Okay.
You know what? Let me just say briefly what this one says. It's talking about belonging. This is so funny. This is one of the interesting things about these works, right? Like, you can talk about the visual structure, or you can talk about the language, or you can talk about the way that they intersect. And this is me riffing off of Bruno Latour, who's another really important writer. His book is also in the gallery right now, in the little reading station. And it's belonging is the egress from separation. And then it kind of becomes unclear, I think, becoming terrestrial. So it's actually two authors that are important to me being quoted here. It's Charles Eisenstein and Bruno Latour, as I mentioned. And it's talking about the story of separateness or human exceptionalism, or globalization, and the way that that has created great division between people, but also between people and other beings. And it's also sort of referring to an antidote to that condition that so many of us find ourselves in. So belonging is the opposite of separateness. And then if we become terrestrial, we transcend the competitive nature of hyper-individualized globalism. It's political.
Nice. That was a great, great little segue into the activist portion of our program. Just kidding, there is not an activist program, but let's develop that in the next virtual program, shall we?
Love it.
So I wanted to move on. I'll just give you another overview of the gallery as it is at this moment in time. Obviously you're getting a sense of like there's just so much richness in each work, the visual, and then also the linguistic or conceptual that is just represented artistically in the visual form. So even this piece, we never even spoke about this, but maybe we can link to
oh sure,
link to this document at some point in the as a follow-up to the event or something. So this is the third artwork that we had sort of talked about this. To me, this is the one that kind of sums up a lot of what I find so intriguing in Candace's work. The title is Preposition for the Permeability of Language. Mm-hmm. It just sort of in this piece, in each piece, but in this one especially, I just find this tension between the structure of the text and then also the organic visual form. So, we just talked about the marbling process and your sort of renegade marbling practice that you use. I was just hoping that you could just talk about that tension and maybe how it specifically plays out in this work.
Yeah, word art. Is it word? Is it art? This is so funny. Fun fact or like interesting fact, this piece is so large that to marble this one, I had to use my husband's Subaru as my drying rack for the paper. So if you can imagine, I had this giant blue tarp in my outside of my house, and I filled it up almost like a little kiddie pool. And I did my marbling outside, and then I just had this giant 6-foot piece of paper, and we printed the water, and then my husband had to help me lift it out, and we had to like sling it over the Subaru so it could dry. This is pretty fun. There's some neat photos. Maybe I'll try to dig them up and share them on the Facebook event. But yeah, so word art, which is way more important than Subaru drying racks. There is this tension between those things, and we just saw that, like the way that we talked about the first piece, it was all about the language. Like, what was the language saying? What does it mean? Who said it? Why is it important? Is it inspiring? Do I care? And then the second piece, it was much more about the visual structure and the materials and how those things were speaking compositionally. It was more of like a formal discussion, like how is this thing looking? What am I seeing color-wise? And I think that for the word art, for calligraphic illumination, for calligraphy, you're always dealing with both. You're always dealing with the legible and that which speaks to the part of the brain that really wants to interpret language and identify information and categorize. And you're also dealing with the power of visual art, which is beyond language, often, not always, but often. And so I'm asking your brain to do two things, which can feel overwhelming, or more than two things sometimes, which can feel overwhelming. And there's a lot to pay attention to. I know this because I'll be working on it and I will see new things, and I'm the one that's making it. So there's this strange space that I have to exist in to work with the language, transcribing from my source materials. And in this case, for the permeability of language, it's directly from David Abram, who wrote this wonderful book, The Spell of the Sensuous, which is very formative to me. and I was responding to him. So I'm kind of creating a poetic essay in response to his idea about the opening up of the definition of language. It again speaks to the animist in me, having more than just what we see as alphabets be language, having more than just the oral or the visual alphabet be readable, legible. So, and then of course I'm also sort of dealing with these elemental qualities, the marbling, the structure, and then how are these languagey bits that we can see and even try to read, how are they sort of morphing and also sliding in and out of the marbling, the different colors, the different materials. And so again, there's this really strange oscillating quality where the brain or the observation of the work goes in and out of the realm of language, the realm of poetry, or the realm of meditation even sometimes. There is a lot of tension there, and I say tension not like it's a problem. It's just that there's not one modality that this kind of work allows you to see it in. There's inherently different aspects of perception that are coming into play. I think I'm very interested in that. Some of the most meaningful and inspiring work I've ever seen has had nothing to do with color or medium or material. It's been a couple of words printed on a page. In that sense, I'm very literary. I'm very rooted in the history of writing and language, but I also see the limitations to that. I'm also a visual artist. I'm also a painter. So I know that there's a lot that can be said and communicated that is outside of what we consider language. So these are all questions that I hold. And again, all of this work, they're all Gaia illuminations. So they're all related to my research and desire to really come into a deeper, more meaningful relationship ecologically with the world around me, which includes other human beings and also other beings and also things I can't even recognize as beings yet. Yeah, where was I going with that?
Well, I guess, I think you're going towards like basically, this idea of word art and, how we discussed like that it's, you're using language in this really, pointed way in the works. And yet for the work to be just a typewriter, like, a typewritten essay, that's sort of the big question that I think is sort of, a helpful opposition when considering your work. Because if this was just a typewritten essay, how would we, what would be lost? Or in your opinion, like, why didn't you just decide to write the essay?
Yeah, I think it really is because I know there's so much more that can be conveyed. I think we all know that. I think I feel fairly confident making a universal statement like that. Anytime we as humans have really, really deep emotions or a strong connection, our words fail us. Our words are inadequate. Our words are, they're unrefined, bad apprentices. I think I'm quoting Christy Maxwell really badly there. They're amateurs at what we're trying to get across. There's a lot of thinking that we do and feeling that we do that completely avoids the verbal or avoids language because it's not enough. So I think that, and I'm not trying to say that these marbled Gaia illuminations are finally enough. They are really like hinting at how much more there is to say that my words will never get across, and that others' words can inspire feeling in me, but even they are not getting the full message out. For David Abrams, I mean, the crux of the book, The Spell of the Sensuous, it's all about it is animism. It is this way that we, before written language, as human beings, we could read things that we didn't make up and figure. We could read wind and water and trees and lichens and moss, and not just for our own purposes. It's because there's things that these beings have to say. And that's an interesting concept, and one that is pretty outside of common perspective, at least in our culture, that typically holds that humans are the only ones that have anything interesting to say, and that most other beings are accessory. So I disagree with that. And then I use these illuminations to hint at everything I can't wrap my head around.
That's so beautifully said, Candace. Yeah, I mean, it just makes me think back to your marbling process, and that you actually are imprinting the air movement on the surface of from the room, or from over the baby pool outside on your lawn. So yeah, in an almost really in a really literal way, you are like recording that language in nature, and representing it here. And I guess, yeah, maybe that was one more thing to discuss with this work, the sort of, just because of like this, like really the depth of the title, just on itself, preposition for the permeability of language. If you can just speak a little bit to like the language versus figuration.
Right, like why wouldn't I go out and do my very best to use my rendering skills to draw all of the finite, perfect detail of like a mucky forest floor. I think we were talking about this in preparation for the conversation, and I said that jokingly, and I thought, oh, maybe I should do a whole series where I render the mucky forest floors. That's such a good idea. Because I'm very committed to the tradition of figuration and representation in visual art. I think it's a really meaningful practice. It's the opportunity for us to really observe and to try to start paying attention to those things that usually escape us, usually don't get counted as legible. But yeah, why is there no representation here? It's because there is yet more than we can even see. So it's sort of more here to hint at the symbolic enormity of the information we are missing. And it's more macrocosmic. So I think that when you're really paying attention and painting or drawing a subject and doing your best to represent that subject, or even create a good portrait, you're capturing a lot of what is there, that and you're interpreting a lot that can't be seen, but you're doing it through the lens of what is observed. And so here I'm sort of more interested in symbolically that which transcends our sensibility, our ability to sense. So there's, yeah, it's a little bit more metaphorical. I mean, I have kind of a highly skeptical intellectual bent on some of this stuff. It's very easy for me just to think about it a lot. And then, I guess I get that gets reflected in the way that I want everything that I produce to become very charged.
Well, I think you're successful with that, Candace. And I guess, yeah, I don't know how, I'm not quite sure how we're doing on time, but I feel like with that, I think we've really touched on our we've fulfilled our promise to talk about ecology and perception. So I'm glad for that. But I think yeah, I guess like how, I think maybe you have already discussed this, like the idea of your views on ecology, maybe just like if you wanted to speak a little bit more about deep green ecology.
Yeah, sure. Actually, I'll do that. And I just checked on the chat, and we're close to time, but not out of time. I'll touch on deep ecology, and then I would love to answer any questions for those of you who are in the Zoom call. And I'll try my best to also look at the Facebook. It's very challenging to do all these things. So thank you for bearing with us. Deep ecology. It is deep green theory and deep ecology. They're pretty much synonymous. The idea that nature and other beings have inherent value that transcends the usefulness to humanity. It decentralizes humankind. It takes us off of the top of the pyramid and puts us into a very deep and interconnected network with other beings and other life. I don't just think, this is actually much more representative of how life on Earth really exists. We're all interconnected. The air I breathe, we're very intimately aware of this these days, right? The air I breathe becomes the air you breathe. And then the resources that I take are resources that we share. And so there's a lot of connectedness where our culture often commits to separateness. And so deep ecology is a movement, an intellectual pursuit, research. It's community that is seeking to really challenge that assumption of separateness, exceptionalism, and human as most important. Yeah, that's the short of it. And then I would love to go and see, a couple people asked some questions. I want to make sure I answer them while we're here. Cool. Caitlin, my wonderful collaborator and friend Caitlin Ott is here, and she asked if I use natural dyes to marble the paper. And the answer is yes. Yeah, Sumi ink is a natural base, and I also eschew all synthetic dyes and polymer-based art supplies because I think it's important to be a responsible global citizen. Let's see, what other questions do we have? Jose, thanks for coming, Jose. Is your research inner research as well as external research? Oh, yeah. Yeah, wow, I think it's so important to bring that up because what does that mean? A lot of this can come across as preachy, maybe my art, but also the way that deep ecology or any kind of movement can present. It's like, I have this answer and here it is. I think that it's important to keep that in mind. All of this has to do with wrestling with my own relationships, and that's really like the root of what ecology is, right? Like how beings are relating to each other. So this is very much having to do with a personal process as well as a little bit of an evangelical process. Like, look at how this beautiful idea, we can all live in an interconnected, magical, utopian world. How exciting and inspiring is that? So both of those things are happening at the same time. Good question, thank you. Sam Jones, also thanks for coming, Sam. Awesome artist. Can you talk about your process of the calligraphy? It feels as though each letter is a microcosm of the larger forms. Ooh, I'm so glad that you see that. Some of that, when you're doing calligraphy, you practice for many, many, many years and you're just bad at it. And then all of a sudden you kind of cross this weird threshold where you have this beautiful muscle memory and you're not paying attention, and it is a little bit meditative, and you lose hours doing the same lines over and over and over again. So I think that muscle memory, that somatic experience of doing the writing, it's embedding the bigger picture into the smaller form. It's really helping to tie the micro and macro together. And I think also, like, there's this relationship of the physical movement of doing the calligraphy and holding the pen and coming into relationship with the ink that is helping to embed some of the ideology about that which transcends the intellect and the lingual, because there's this physical part of it too. So even though it's very fine motor skill, it's really rooted. It's much more earthy. So it gives it a little bit of body. Yeah, thank you, Sam. Let's see, Phil, have you read Underland by Robert McFarlane? Oh, I will. It's on my to-read list. I'm so excited about that. Is William Blake an influence? Yes. William Blake is so great. Which is really funny because when I was in art school, I didn't really like his style, and I think I still feel a little bit like jaded on the particular way that he renders, which is really funny, but I love William Blake. He's so profoundly interested in the intersection of the spiritual and the material, and he had this fabulous kind of heretical approach to getting you to think about what utopia was, what the world was, what our relationship to the world was. Really big fan. Thank you for bringing that up. I know I like have all of these wonderful artistic grandparents that I can call upon, venerate the ancestors a little bit. Thank you for the questions. I'm going to try to look at the Facebook and see if anybody has typed in any questions. It is a little hard for me to tell where on the Facebook I would go to do that. But anyway, I'm really glad that those of you who tuned in via Zoom were able to ask. Yes. Anyway, I cannot see that. Oh, there's one other question. I'll answer this final question. Nishki said, what are you doing besides making art, visual art? Oh, that's a lovely question. I am currently sheltering in place in Vermont in a combination of my art studio and my home, and writing a lot of poetry. But besides my writing and my visual art, my husband and I are establishing an artist residency here in Vermont. So the planning and preparatory process for that has been a big part of what we've been focusing on. And I also have all kinds of wonderful collaborations that I'm doing with poets here in Vermont, running a poetry chapbook, printing workshop in my village of Putney at the end of, well, probably in the fall at this point. And also collaborations with Bianca Stone, who's an incredible poet, and others. So it's been very poetic. It's been very lingual here lately. But other than that, learning a little bit more about gardening, really getting my hands dirty and doing my best to honor these ideas outside of their ideation. So anyway, thank you so much, Mary. Are there any final questions or any final things you'd like to say?
You know, I feel like we covered so much of the, the things that are just sort of, just so intriguing about the works that are on view. And, I'm thankful to everyone for, dealing with the technological mediation. These works are really incredible in person. So I'm just like really glad that we could come up with a simulation for people. I'm your stand-in. I'm enjoying the work in person, and I'm just really glad that everyone could join us virtually.
Yes. No, thank you so much to everybody. I appreciate that you are here. I appreciate your questions and your attention. And it's just so lovely to share these things and these ideas and images with you. Thank you so much. I've recorded the presentation, and I'm going to do my best to make it accessible so it can be shared. And again, just thank you so much to Mary and to all of you for coming, and for coming virtually and staying safe and healthy otherwise.
All right. Thanks so much, wonderful. Candace. Okay. Take care, everybody. We'll meet again soon.
Thanks, friends. Oh, I will say before I totally sign off that if you would like to see an e-catalog that I made for the show, if you go to my website, which I'll put in the chat, there is a PDF that you can download that has some of my writing, images of the work, bibliography, all that stuff. So you can download that from my main page. Yeah, just check back to the Facebook or Amos Eno Gallery's website for any additional updates about events. And of course, we have many other wonderful member artists who will also be doing online programming this summer. So thank you. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend and a great night, everybody.